I'm Shahar Azani, and in the news, Israel's political crisis amid hopes for the future. Some of you may have noticed a small change in my background in the past few months, and that change is the addition of a print. That print is an 1867 painting by Italian painter Francesco Hayez, depicting the destruction of the second Jewish temple in Jerusalem in the year 70 by Roman legions. This was a momentous occasion for the Jewish people, one that led to the loss of our independence and to the beginning of thousands of years of exile, which only came to an end in 1948, when the Jewish state of Israel was re-established back in our homeland. It is also a constant reminder. It's a reminder of what lies ahead in case of great frictions that remain unresolved. For according to tradition and historical accounts, the fall of Jerusalem was a direct result of battles within the walls of the city of Jerusalem between moderates and extremists, deep and profound disagreements, and what the Talmud aptly describes as hatred inside, within the Jewish people. It was those moments in our history that shaped and resulted in a direct pain and suffering by many millions of Jews through the generations. And it was that moment that I tend to think about a lot when I try to see a path for the state of Israel and for the Jewish people, whenever we are encountering disagreements, frictions, and fragmentations. For we are fortunate to be living in today's world, when we have a strong and prosperous state of Israel. But within that fortune lies a responsibility not to allow the third temple to fall again, to always see beyond our moment of disagreement to our eternity of existence, to realize the opportunity that we have and to seize on it, to make sure and guarantee the safety and peace of Jerusalem. It is an appropriate conversation to have, which is the one I intend to have today, with a very special person, member of Knesset, Tehila Friedman of the Blue and White Party, part of Israel's coalition government. Member of Knesset Friedman, Tehila, made her maiden speech in the Knesset a month ago on August 12, 2020. That speech went viral as it touched the hearts and souls of many, not only in Israel, but in Europe and here in the United States and across the Jewish world. She spoke truthfully and from the heart. So before we enter into this important conversation, so befitting to have now after Rosh Hashanah and before Yom Kippur, as we stand judgment, let me introduce member of Knesset Tehila Friedman. Tehila Friedman is a member of the Blue and White Party. She was a research fellow at the Hartman Institute and a program director for Shacharit, a think tank promoting new social covenant in Israel. She is the former chair of Ne'emanei Torah V'Avoda, a modern Orthodox movement promoting pluralism and democracy, as well as a board member of the Yerushalmit movement, a non-profit for a pluralistic Jerusalem. Tehila was a fellow in the Mandel Leadership Institute and director of the Israel office of the Jewish Federation of Central New Jersey, a grant officer at the Rothschild Foundation, and an advisor to Natan Sharansky. Tehila lives in Jerusalem with her husband and 5 children. So before we begin, let us take a listen and take a deep and profound look into ourselves as we hear the words member of Knesset Tehila Friedman spoke before the Knesset a month ago in her maiden speech. Please take a listen.
בשבועות האחרונים, מאז הגעתי לבית הזה, אני לא מפסיקה לחשוב על רבן יוחנן בן זכאי, אחד היהודים החשובים ביותר בהיסטוריה. מי שברגע האחרון הצליח לחלץ את העם היהודי מירושלים של בית המקדש הבוער ליבנה של בית המדרש המחבר ולהמציא אותו מחדש. אני חושבת על המנהיג הזה שחי בתוך ירושלים, בתוך מלחמת אחים נוראה. כשבחוץ עומדים הרומאים, ומחכים לרגע הנכון להיכנס ולהחריב הכל. מלחמת אחים שהתחילה בגלל ויכוח על היחס לרומאים, אבל הפכה מהר מאוד למלחמה של זהות, מלחמת הכל בכל. מה שאתה חושב על הרומאים הפך למי שאתה. מה שאת מאמינה שצריך לעשות הפך למי שאת. אם אני לא מסכימה איתכם, אני נגדכם, לגמרי, עד לשפיכות דמים. השנאה שטפה את הכל. בשם השנאה נשלפו סכינים בבית המקדש. בשם השנאה הוצתו מחסני המזון שיכלו להחזיק עיר במצור. בשם השנאה הגיע הרעב, ועם הרעב הגיע הייאוש. רבן יוחנן בן זכאי לא היה מהאום. הוא ותלמידיו היו צד למאבק. הם נלחמו בקנאים ובקנאות. אבל בשלב מסוים הוא בוחר אחרת. הוא מבין שבמלחמת האחים כולם כבר הפסידו. והוא עושה מהלך מפתיע ופונה לאויב המר שלו. זה שלהבנתו אשם בחורבן המתקרב. אבא סיקרא קראו לו, מנהיג הקנאים בירושלים. גם אבא סיקרא כבר יודע שמלחמת האחים יותר מסוכנת מהאויב שבחוץ. אבל האיש הזה שהבעיר את האש, מגלה שהוא כבר לא מצליח להשתלט עליה. האנשים שלו לא מקשיבים לו. השנאה שהוא הפיץ הפכה להיות יותר חזקה ממנו. יחד, ראש הקנאים וראש המתונים מצליחים להבריח את רבן יוחנן בן זכאי החוצה מירושלים, לא על מנת להחזיר את הגלגל אחורה, אלא כדי להתחיל משהו חדש, להניח את היסודות ליום שאחרי. לנאומי פתיחה של חברי כנסת חדשים יש כללים. אני אמורה לספר על תחנות בחיי, להודות למי שהביאני עד הלום, ולשתף משהו מהחלומות ומהשאיפות שבשמן ולשמן הגעתי אל הבית הזה. אבל נאום הפתיחה שלי יכול מאוד להיות גם נאום הסיום. והרלוונטיות של החלומות והתוכניות שאיתם באתי מוטלת בספק, בתוך הכאוס הזה של דהרה אל התהום וההרס שבבחירות רביעיות. ולכן אני מוותרת על כללי הטקס, מבקשת סליחה מאבא ואמא שיושבים פה ובאמת הביאוני עד הלום, ומהורי האיש שלי, ומכל השותפות והשותפים הרבים לדרך שאני צריכה להזכיר. אבל אני מבקשת לומר משהו אחר. נדמה לי שהוא גם בשמם. 2000 שנה עברו מרבן יוחנן. חזרנו לירושלים, בנינו מדינה. אבל עכשיו, בתוך משבר אדיר ממדים, אנחנו מוצאים את עצמנו שוב במקום מפחיד. מגפה קטלנית משתוללת בחוץ, ובפנים אותו רצון הרסני לנצח אחד את השני. אותו עיוורון ואיוולת, אותה שנאה ממארת שגורמת לנו להשקיע את מרב האנרגיה במאבק הפנימי. ושוב כמו אז, שורפים את מחסני האמון, מפוררים את מערכות השלטון, מסכנים בחוסר אחריות מטריף דעת את עצם קיום הבית המשותף. בלב ימי הקורונה, בתוך משבר בריאותי, כלכלי וחברתי שלא ידענו כמותו, בתוך משבר משטרי, אחרי 1.5 שנה בשיתוק, ללא תקציב מאושר, בגרעון קשה, במיתון, שוב יש מי שרוצה שנוחז איש בציציות הראש של אחיו, ששוב נשוסה זה בזה, ששוב ניקח כל פצע וצלקת חברתית ונשפשף אותה עד זוב דם, שוב נלעג ונבוז לכאבים של אחרים. 3 פעמים בתוך 1.5 שנה ניסיתם לנצח, לכופף, להכריע, להכניע. חייבים להפסיק את זה. חייבים להפסיק לנסות לנצח. אסור שישראל הראשונה תכריע את ישראל השנייה, אבל אסור גם שישראל השנייה תכריע את ישראל הראשונה. אסור לנצח אחד את השני. אני יהודייה, דתייה, ציונית דתית, לאומית, פמיניסטית, ירושלמית. גדלתי לתוך שפה ומסורת מסוימים. גדלתי לתוך בית, קהילה ומסורת שעיצבו אותי. יש בעולם שלי המון אמת ויופי וטוב, אבל לא כל האמת, לא כל היופי, לא כל הטוב. אני לא רוצה שכולם יהפכו להיות אני. לא רוצה שכולם יאמינו באותם דברים כמוני, כי אני יודעת שגם בקהילות ועולמות אחרים יש אמת ויופי וטוב, ויש לי מה ללמוד מהם. יש לי מה ללמוד מהמסורתיות המזרחית, מיהודי ברית המועצות, מיהודי אתיופיה, מצאצאי החלוצים בהתיישבות העובדת, מהליברלים האינדיבידואליסטים, מהחרדים, מהחרדלים. יש לי מה ללמוד מהערבים, יש לי מה ללמוד מהדרוזים, מהבדואים, יש לי מה ללמוד מיהודי התפוצות. נכון, לחלק מהקבוצות והמגזרים האלה יש עקרונות, ערכים ומעשים שאני מתנגדת אליהם בתוקף. חלקם ממש מאיימים עליי, כאישה, כיהודייה, כציונית, כדתייה. אבל אני זוכרת ויודעת שבכל אחת מהקבוצות, ממש בכל אחת, יש אומנם את מי שרואים את עצמם כדרך היחידה, הנכונה, שתכף כולם יכירו בצדקתה, ירצו להיות כמותה והיא תוביל ותשלוט. אבל יש גם את מי שמבינים שהשונות בינינו אינה זמנית, שנגזר עלינו לחיות יחד ושזה אתגר חיינו. עמם אני מבקשת לכרות ברית של מתונים, עם כל הכוחות, מכל המגזרים, שמבינים את האתגר הזה שנקרא חיים ביחד. להחזיר את הכוח מהקצוות שמטריפים את החיים של כולנו וליצור מרכז משותף. אני מדברת בטון רך, אני יודעת. ואפשר לטעות ולחשוב שגם המסר שלי הוא של מרכז רך ופשרני, אבל זה בדיוק להפך. המרכז שלי הוא מרכז לכתחילה, מרכז קנאי, שלא מוכן להתפשר על המרכזיות שלו, על האחריות שלו לכל תושבי המדינה, על המקום שיש בו לכל מי שרוצה באמת לחיות יחד. ששם גבול לקנאות, ששם גבול לאנוכיות. מרכז שיש לו מסירות נפש על מתינות, על דמוקרטיה, על יהדות שעושה מקום. מרכז שמגן בגופו על כללי משחק שמאפשרים לנו לנהל מחלוקת בלי להתפרק לחתיכות. הרב אברהם יצחק הכהן קוק כתב לפני שנים רבות על 3 כוחות שמתאבקים כעת במחננו, הקודש, האומה והאנושיות. במילים שלנו, הדתיות, הלאומיות וההומניזם. הרב קוק עצמו היה איש שכל כולו קודש, אבל הוא ידע כמה מסוכן הקודש המוחלט, הלאומיות המוחלטת או ההומניזם המוחלט. אף אחד לא צודק לבדו. חברה בריאה היא חברה שיש בה את 3 הכוחות הללו, לא רק כדי שירסנו אחד את השני, אנחנו זקוקים זה לזה. ב6 שבועות שאני בבית הזה, שמעתי אין סוף לעג וערס כלפי קבוצות שלמות בחברה הישראלית. שמעתי את התקווה שהם ייעלמו, ואנחנו נוכל לשלוט ללא מצרים. אני רוצה לספר לכם משהו. הם לא ייעלמו. צאו לכמה בחירות שתרצו. אף אחד לא ייעלם. אם נמשיך לנסות לנצח אחד את השני, מי שינוצח יהיה העתיד של הילדים שלנו. מי שתובס תהיה הערבות ההדדית, החוסן הפנימי, היכולת להמשיך ולקיים את הנס הזה שנקרא מדינת ישראל. אנחנו חיים בתוך נס. אני בת לצנחן ממשחררי ירושלים. האבא של האיש שלי הוא צנחן ממשחררי ירושלים. אני חיה ומגדלת את ידיי בירושלים. היום הכי פשוט ובסיסי שלי הוא התגשמות הנבואות הגדולות ביותר של נביאי ישראל. זקנים וזקנות ברחובה של עיר, ילדים וילדות משחקים. מה שעבור סבי וסבתי היה חלום שקשה לדמיין, הוא מציאות החיים הפשוטה שלי. אבל מעולם לא לקחתי אותה כמובן מאליו. יהודה עמיחי לימד אותנו, מרחוק כל דבר נראה נס, אבל מקרוב גם נס לא נראה כך. אפילו מי שעבר בים סוף בבקיעת הים, ראה רק את הגב המזיע של ההולך לפניו ואת ירחיו הרחבות. אני בעלת נס המכירה בניסה. אני מודה לקדוש ברוך הוא על הזכות לחיות בנס הזה, ובעיקר אני מרגישה אחראית עליו. לשלומו ולשלמותו, כי שלומי קשור בחוט לשלומו. באתי לכאן כדי להיות חלק מההנהגה שמחויבת לקיום הנס שנקרא מדינת ישראל. הנהגה שלא רוצה לנקום על עוולות, לדאוג לאנשי שלומנו או להיות צודקת, אלא רוצה לשקם ולאחות. הנהגה שרוצה לדאוג למי שבחר בה בדיוק כמו למי שלא. שלא לועגת לכאב של מי שהפסיד, שמאמינה באחווה. הנהגה שמטפחת מערכות שלטון מעולות, שפועלת לפיוס ושיקום פנימי. הנהגה שלא רוצה למחוק אף אחד. לא הנהגה של קילרים. אני מחכה להנהגה, אני מחכה ומתפללת להנהגה של הילרים. האמנתי בהכרח של ממשלת אחדות. אני עדיין מאמינה שזו הדרך היחידה להניח את היסודות לשלב הבא בחיי המדינה, להציל אותנו מחורבן, להמציא את עצמנו מחדש. הרבה מחיי המקצועיים והציבוריים הקדשתי לחיבורים שנועדו להביא ליצירת מרכז ישראלי ויהודי חדש. אני מאמינה שהאחריות והחובה שלנו היא לעשות רבן יוחנן בן זכאי, לכרות ברית של מתונים, ליצור מרכז ישראלי חדש שמגדיר את עצמו לפי מה שהוא כן ולא לפי מה שהוא לא. אלה ימי הבית השלישי, ובדיוק כמו השניים שקדמו לו, הוא שביר. הוא דליק, הוא לא מובן מאליו. היציבות שלו היא באחריותנו. הקיום שלו תלוי בנו. זאת המשמרת שלנו. תודה.
And now joining us all the way from Jerusalem in Israel, let's give a warm welcome to member of Knesset, Tehila Friedman. Tehila, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So let's touch for a minute on the speech we've all just heard. First of all, kudos for an amazing speech. This truly touched a chord with so many of us here and in Israel and beyond. But just before we touch on it, I just want to ask you, how are you doing? We know Israel is in quarantine. What's happening now? How are you coping with it? How is your family?
How am I doing? Someone asked me and I said, on the personal level, I'm doing great. But as a public figure and as someone who cares deeply, I'm doing not so well, and we're all doing not so well. The numbers are worrying, talking about hundreds of people who are dying, and people who are in lockdown, and people who are sick, and we're not able yet to stop the, how do you say, הדבקות, the
Infection.
infection. We're not doing good enough job. And I think what bothers me most is that I feel that it's a responsibility of the leadership. And as a leadership, we're failing. Because it's a matter of trust. It's a matter of ability to bring groups, not to see all the rules as something against them, as, you know, why are you doing it to me and not to them? All this discourse is horrible. That's the biggest damage. And I feel responsible for changing it, and we're not doing a good enough job yet.
So there we go. We touch again, even when we discuss COVID-19, on the epicenter of your speech, which is us against them, and how we view this as a bigger us. So maybe let's touch upon that speech. Maybe tell us a little.
Because you see, the speech didn't come from nowhere. It comes through, and I'll touch base on it later. It's kind of, I'm in this journey of how we build shared society. How can we create a social cohesiveness? How can we build solidarity? For many years now, it's almost 13 years. Maybe I'll tell you later when and how it started.
No, please do, because I really wanted to ask you about this. If it's something that propelled you, there was something immediate just a week ago or a month ago or 2 months ago that made you write this, or is this a culmination of a journey? Please share it with us.
So it is part of a long journey. Started in Jerusalem 13 years ago when we came back home from Boston. My husband went to school there. And, you know, when you come back from somewhere, you tend to see, when you come back home, you tend to see home in new eyes. And because that's the way it is. And I saw my beloved city declining. I saw a massive wave of negative migration. And I looked around and I saw that this negative migration is a result of too many people who don't feel welcome, don't feel at home, because there is an ongoing fights between groups who own the city, who's gonna be, you know, as a city, who's gonna win the city. And I felt that between those fights, between the ultra-Orthodox and the seculars and the modern Orthodox and the Arabs in different way, but also the Arabs, the city is declining because everyone views themselves as minorities, as minority who need to protect their rights. Nobody think of himself as the responsible adult and the one who's, you know, willing to look on the broader picture, and we don't create a bigger we, and all the time we're fighting over everything, and in this fight, the city is just declining economically, declining socially. I felt also that jury is part of it, because I felt that people Jerusalem is supposed to be the capital of the Jewish people, and if people from the diaspora don't feel welcome, also don't feel that when they come, they have a place. So it's also that's big part of the problem. So my journey is really, it started local from Jerusalem, but it was very fast that I realized that Jerusalem here is not only, but it's a predictor for Israel, because the demography of Jerusalem is always 15 years before Jerusalem. You can compare the numbers of Jerusalem and first grader in Israel. And I'm talking to you 13 years ago. And I thought maybe if we will be able to do something in Jerusalem, maybe after that we can, scale it nationally. Well, as you can see, I was right about the challenge, and I was right about how Jerusalem is a predictor. And we did quite a lot, but the massive, forces against us to the other direction. And I think my decision to go from social society, from civil society, from civil society to politics, came from these feelings that everything that we put together, politics tear apart. Every bridge we build, politics break.
Let me ask you for a minute, just before, I'm super curious, as I'm sure so many of our viewers are. So you arrive in Jerusalem after, 13 years ago, after Boston. And like you said, very aptly, you come back with a different set of, different prism. What do you do? What's the first step you take on your journey?
So the first thing is to look for partners, who else care, who else can I work with. I was in a good position to do it because I was working for the Jewish Federation of New Jersey, and we had endowment funds. So I made a rumor that the foundation is looking to invest in projects that try to, rebuild social cohesiveness in Jerusalem. It was funny because my New Jerseyan board didn't know that yet. And I thought, okay, we'll take care about it later. And I was starting to find partners. And we built a group, and we were left wings and right wings, and we were Orthodox and non-observant, and we were Olim and veterans. And back then, we thought that we are very diverse. Today, I know that, come on, we didn't have back then ultra-Orthodox, and we didn't have Arabs. But it was first step. And we put this group together. We called ourselves the Jerusalemite movement, because that's what we were. We were Jerusalemites. And we started to do, the first thing we did were activities in Shabbat. Why Shabbat? Because we realized that Shabbat is one day that non-observant families feel that they don't have a place in the city. And there's nothing to do, everything is closed, And we thought, okay, that's easy one. If there's nothing to do, let's make something to do. Now I'm saying it's easy one, but you can see my hat. I'm Orthodox, I'm totally observant. And we created a set of activities for families in public sphere, in parks. And it existed for 8 years. I raised money for that. I organized that. I did many things. I've never been there because those activities were not Shabbat, I don't know, were not built for Shabbat people who are halachic people like myself. And yet I thought that's something that's very important that,
and you were okay with that. You allowed for it to coexist. You could coexist with it.
I was more than okay with that. I thought it's very important. I thought that Jerusalem needed to be a place that people, not only people like myself, would feel comfortable in. And I thought it's also my responsibility to make place for others. It's very easy. I didn't think about it as coexistence, because coexistence many times it's like live and let live. And I thought that we need more than coexistence. We need ערבות הדדית. We need we need solidarity. And solidarity is that I'm not only taking care of my needs and, not disturbing others. Solidarity is saying, we're ערבים זה לזה. We're responsible for each other. And look, I can give you an example, very small one from yesterday. We daven, we pray in I live in a building, there's like, four buildings, and between them there is a grace, the dish between just, small open space. And we daven there, the neighbors. Now, not all the neighbors are daveners. Not all the neighbors are observant. Not all the neighbors go to pray in Rosh Hashanah. And yet, we can't go to synagogue because it's not safe. So we send, a small bowl of honey and a note to our neighbors, and we said we're sorry. We know it's not. We're sorry for the inconvenience. We hope that we hope you understand. We will try to be not to be very noisy, though shofar is a noisy thing. So and we hope you also maybe enjoy find ways to enjoy the experience. And I'm a deep believer in not only live and let live. I'm a deep believer in being Revim זה לזה, that you can do that if you understand that people who are different than you are not necessarily against you, and life are not necessarily war, and the common good is bigger than the interest of the sector. I'm not romantic, but I think it's doable. It's a matter of leadership.
How did they respond to your note and with a small jar of honey? What was the response like?
So most of them were, they were moved by the jest. Some of them said, yes, we do feel uncomfortable. But I think, look, I don't know. I guess there are people who don't like it. But I think most of the people understand that this is a situation, this is a need, and we're not trying to force anything over anyone. We're just trying, to maximize the situation, and it's temporary. So yeah, it worked, and people reacted beautifully, most of them. And yet, I think we need to. I need to remind myself that it's legit that some of the people don't feel comfortable. It's okay. It's legit.
Talking about responses, I can't help but relate to what I believe were thousands of reactions, if not more, that you got to your speech in the Knesset with, on social media and beyond. You touched the hearts of many people. This kind of viral response to your speech, what do you think it means? What kind of message what did it mean to you? Maybe share with us the kind of responses you got and what do you think these echo?
First, it was a total shock. Who would imagine that a speech, very heavy one, no, I don't know, nothing very personal, but just, a speech with Jewish text and quotes would become so viral. That the reaction came from a very, very broad spectrum of people in Israel, from the heart of the ultra-Orthodox society, all the way to the very far left. I think the only one who didn't really reacted, and I understand why, were Arabs. I mean, Arab Knesset members did say, we saw, we don't agree, but but we appreciate we felt the sincerity or something like that. And I understand that my text was very, very Zionist and very Jewish is hard to digest to someone who's not. And again, it's totally legit and yet in the Jewish society, a very broad spectrum of reaction. And people said, I think what moved me mostly were people who said, we were crying with you. And I felt all, I mean, I knew it somewhere, but to hear it, that so many people are feeling the same. It's not like I was surprised, and yet it's a great encouragement, because it means that we're not really cynical. We're not really we don't love the situation, and we wish to be different. We want to be different.
You're talking about a broad spectrum. It's not only of different communities. I just want to share with you, Tehila, that you touched also the hearts of the young. My daughter, who is 17, watched your speech with me because it was very important for me to share it with my children, and I cried with you. And I have to say that that sentence that you echoed there, as you walk about the streets of Jerusalem and you see the youngsters play and the elderly sit on the corners of the street, that your ability to live the dream, to live the prophecies of the prophets of Israel, to live your ordinary, which is, and recognize that it is the extraordinary, is exactly how my daughter reacted to it. So how do you explain the fact that you were able to breach the communal gaps, you were able to breach the age gap, you touched in such a diverse way? This was really an incredible moment.
But you know what? Maybe that's who we are. Maybe really that's who we are. And we kind of forgot that. Look, I'll give you an example from America. Only 12 years ago, when Obama did his campaign, he came with extremely positive message. Now, leave aside what we think about what we did, what were the results. Let's put it aside for a second. I'm thinking about it because 2 weeks ago, I read the book of Michelle Obama, her biography.
Becoming, I did too.
And I thought, wow, it's amazing. It's not like ancient history. It's only 12 years ago that he thought that politically it's wise to come with a very uniting and positive message. What happened to politics? What happened to us? That now it seems like to come with positive message. Who do that? You know,
that's
you need
the strength. That was the amazing thing about your message, Tehila.
Exactly.
We're used to hearing on the Knesset floor all of these divisive messages.
But you see, yet after thousands of people wrote to me, after 2 million people, watched it, yet I think the reaction I'm getting the most is, but it's so naive. And people say things like, it's very nice. We wish it was possible, but it's impossible.
But isn't it in our hands, Tehila? Isn't it in our hands to make it possible? Can we not make it possible? Because you're talking about the authenticity of your message. And I can tell you, as somebody who's roamed the fields of Israel, public image, and what we call advocacy and education, and what echoed the most was your kind of message. The real, the authentic, the things that come out of the heart, come into the heart.
Yeah, I agree that it's in our hands to tell you that I'm 100% sure what's a way. It's kind of, I know where we need to get. What's going to be actually the way to get there? That's a big mystery. I can describe many small steps, but like how we change the big picture. Look, Israel is in a great crisis, and I wish it was only us. I mean, when I look over the ocean, the situation is not any better. maybe it's worse. I mean, when I'm talking to my American friends, and I feel there is really that talking in us and they
Very much
hardly know,
so. Very much
and
so.
they hardly know someone who's voting the opposite of them. They hardly know someone. Leave aside, close relationship. Now in Israel, I must say it's not true. We're six siblings. I think we voted for four different parties, and 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 we're very close to each other. Uh, and it's not weird. I mean, you can think of hundreds of Israeli families that you know personally that are exactly the same. Okay, that they voted for different parties are very close. I know, I'm sure that Israeli Center exists. And what's frustrating me is that I'm I'm not even sure what we're fighting over, where this hate is coming from, because I think we agree over most of the questions. I can picture you those agreements, and somehow we were not able yet to translate it into a strong enough political, power. Now, I do want to say that after this speech, Benny Gantz, he called me and he said, "I felt you gave words to what I did," and I agree. I mean, you don't need to react because you can take side,
No,
but
but I
I'm
will tell you, I actually do want to say that because that was my personal feeling as well when you spoke, that you were echoing the blue and white message.
I agree, and I was so moved by him saying that because he is not a person of words. He's a person of action, and many of my friends in the party are the same. They are people, they are doers, and I'm also trying to be a doer, but I am a person I also believe that the story is very important. I mean, ideas matter, and I think it's not enough to do the right thing. Language and the story are also important.
Do you, let's talk for a second about social media. We're used to seeing hatred on social media, the extreme memes taking over, fighting each other. Here you took social media in the very best of ways to spread the good word. So what's your stance? Are you in favor? Do you believe it's a positive tool in our language, or does it play more of a negative role?
I think that it doesn't matter how it plays, it's matter what's the possibility of it. And I feel that people don't take seriously enough the responsibility in social media because it's the end of the world. It's the end of the day. Politicians need the public feedback. And if you gave your like or dislike to someone, that's your feedback. And that gives strength and power, and I feel we're giving the microphone and we're giving our like and we're giving our time to the radicals too many times. And sometimes it's not because we agree, but because it's so sexy, and those people who can say the message in 5 words and it's simple and it's, look at him, he said it so, I don't know how we say it in English, הוא הכניס לו.
Gave it to him. He gave it.
Yeah, he gave it to him. And while the moderate people who tend to be also more complicated, because our message is many times on one hand, on the other hand, because life is complicated. It's like, it's not strong enough, it's not sexy enough. So the social media can be great if people will take the role in it more seriously. I think people have the power, really the power to change the language if they will ignore radicals and give strength to the moderate leaders. It's not only about how you vote, it's also about who you follow, who you like, who you react to. The situation today is, if someone is tweeting something aggressive, lying, rude, he gets so many reactions. Yeah, we are like feeding the trolls all the time. And you know, but that's, politicians need the feedback. So if people will use the social media better, it will be a great tool.
I wanted to ask you, you mentioned Boston, you mentioned your work in Jersey, and then of course back in Israel representing US Jewry. You are one of those unique Israelis who actually understands both sides of the ocean on the Jewish matter. And I want to ask you a question on two levels. One, what can we do, in your opinion, to increase the connection between young American Jews and Israel? And what can we do in general to strengthen the bond between the Jewish people on both sides of the Atlantic? Because it seems like there is so much eroding in the past few years.
Look, Corona made it much more easier and harder at the same time. Easier because just like we speak now, and it seems, you know, so naturally, this Zoom and really, I mean, the physical gap is not, doesn't matter so much. That's how it make it easier. It make it harder because we all become more local because of the Corona. You know, we are much more rooted in our immediate surrounding. Now, what needs to be done? I think first, I see it as our turn, Israeli turn. I think for many years, Israel was a project of the Jewish people, and it wasn't like that enough the other side. The Jewish people was not enough the project of Israel, and that should change. And we as Israelis and as a decision maker need to consult much more. I mean, when we are making decisions that are going to impact directly Diaspora-Israel, we can't do it without consulting, without understanding what's the impact and how it looks from, you know, from the other side. Because when it comes to our voter, we're the voice. But when we are making decisions that are going to impact you, who's your voice? So the consulting part is very important. For me, I thought, it's not that I thought, I also saw that all those groups that did reverse birthright, all those groups of Israelis with high, you know, in high levels in the media, in politics, that went to see diaspora communities. And it was kind of a trend. The numbers weren't big, but it was important people. It really made a difference, because I see that for many years, we, the people who are involved in Israel diaspora relation, we were such a small groups. I think I knew most of the people personally because it was so narrow. And today it's not like that. I think that, I'll give you an example, okay? David Bitan, okay? He's a Knesset member from the Likud. He's from Rishon LeZion, came really not coming from anywhere that you would think he would be interested in diaspora Jewry, not at all. And he led an effort now. He actually created a governmental foundation to support small communities in the world. Okay, understand? And that was because, I don't know, maybe it was Jaffe, I don't know who, took him twice to get to know communities and understand what it means, diaspora Jewry. And, you know, once he saw, I mean, what need to be happen is that when we say we don't think only we Israelis, we think we, the Jewish people. And it's not, it doesn't mean that I'm not counting the Arabs, I do. But I can have two families' names. I mean, like, I'm a feminist, so for many years I carried two family names. And I feel that also publicly. I'm Israeli and I'm Jewish. And there is no contradiction between them. I'm both.
Well, you speak definitely a different language, talking about the responsibility of the people and the government of Israel vis-a-vis diaspora Jewry, and that's truly refreshing. I want to talk to you about one of the things you do in the Knesset now is dealing with the religious education, right? Under the committee. You're chairing that subcommittee?
Yes, it's under the Committee of Education. What happened is that we're so busy with the impact of the corona over the education system that we hardly get to issues of sub-communities in Israel. And you know that Israel is crazy enough to have 4 different educational systems within our public system.
Right.
Okay? We have a public schools and religious public and ultra-religious public. It's insane, you know it. To try to explain it in English, I sound to myself like insane. But that's how the Israeli educational system is made. And because there are specific issues that I'm worried about and I think need to be dealt with, that has to do with the ultra-Orthodox education and the modern Orthodox education, I asked to chair a subcommittee. It's not like that I'm not going to be heavily involved in the general committee, but that's another platform.
So what do you think in this regard about the Jewish education in the diaspora? How important do you think that is? And should the Israeli government do more to support the Jewish education in the US, for instance?
First, that's the first priority for sure when we speak about Jewish life. I mean, we know Jewish life outside of Israel and also in Israel. I mean, we know for a fact, after many research were done, that, for example, the summer camps are one of the most effective tools in Jewish education. And also we know that you cannot compare someone who went to day school to someone who went to public school. It's obvious. I mean, the level of knowledge and also of the feeling of belongingness. It's not even comparable. So for sure, that's where we need. I mean the Jewish people, we need to invest. If we care about Jewish continuity, education, that's a place. And you know, we joke that when families has 4 kids, they're making aliyah. We call it refugee tuition refugees. So because tuition is so high. Now, how exactly it needs to be done? I'm not sure what's the exact way to support, to help people to make Jewish education more accessible. That's the aim, okay? Because Jewish education outside of Israel is way too expensive, and I'm not blaming anyone. It's understood why, but that's a high barrier for people who want to belong and can't afford it. And that's something I think the Israeli government should see as a priority and should see as a responsibility. Now, exactly how, again, I'm not sure. I mean, I said something about it 2 months ago. I got big flashback because the image in Israel, I think many times, is that, you know, most of American Jewry is wealthy and why supporting. Yeah. Now, reality is, as always, more complicated. There are people, you know, there are people who can afford and there are people who can't. And thanks God, the Jewish community is very generous. I mean, there are many philanthropists. I do think Israel should I don't know how, but encourage. I think domestic needs come now before Israel. I dare to say that.
Right.
Because I think domestic needs are, the need now is great because of the corona, and I do also think that Israel should, that if we see ourselves as a the state of the Jewish people, we should put our money where our mouth is.
Well, you are, Tehila, a breath of fresh air in the Israeli politics in the Knesset, and I'd like to ask you just one quick thing before we conclude. Where do you see your future? Politics, civil society, both, to continue doing what you're doing. What's your hopes for the future, if you can put it before us as we look into the new year?
Look, politics is a vehicle. It was never my aim to be a politician. It was always my aim to promote, as I said, social cohesiveness in Israel, better relationship, unity between diaspora and Israel, tolerance or different structure of religion and state in Israel, things, the place of women. Those are the issues that I'm devoting my life to. Am I going to do it now? Now, politics is a great tool. It's a great vehicle for that. But it's only a vehicle. And if I'm not going to serve in politics, I'm going to serve someone else. I can promise you that whatever I'll do, those are the things that I'm going to try to push and promote. Will it be within the political system? I hope to get enough power to be effective. I feel that I'm still learning the language. I can be much more effective, but I'm relatively new. I do hope to have enough time and for Israel not to have another election. And, days will say. We'll see.
Well, I share your hopes, and I'm sure, like many of our JBS viewers, after listening to your speech and hearing you and getting to know you, I'd like to thank you so much, Tehila, for sharing your hopes and dreams and your thoughts for the future of Israel and the Jewish people with us and all of the JBS viewers. And I want to say that we all share your dreams and your prayers for the future, especially now. We send you best wishes of health and joy, and Shana Tova and Gmar Chatima Tova. It was a pleasure having you with us on JBS.
Shana Tova, Ktiva v'Chatima Tova to everybody. We need to have a better year.
Amen and amen. Thank you so much. Take care and all the best. Such incredible words and such a great reminder, especially now, as we stand between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, between the Jewish New Year and the Day of Atonement, to think, to repent, and not only to take a look at the past and what we've done wrong, but also make decisions for the future and how we should do better in the year and years to come, to look beyond our momentary disagreements and divisions into our perpetual unity as a people and the fact that we and we alone can determine our future. It is also a reminder of what lies at the foundation of any national catastrophe. The Talmud tells us the story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. It is a famous story about the destruction of Jerusalem, according to which Kamsa and Bar Kamsa both were important people in Jerusalem during the siege, but they were bitter rivals. One day Kamsa held a banquet, and by mistake, one of his servants invited Bar Kamsa, his long-time enemy. When he saw him during the dinner to which many of the sages of Jerusalem were invited, he came up to him and demanded that he leaves immediately. Bar Kamsa looked at him, pleading, and said, "Listen, please don't embarrass me. I will pay you my share of the food." Kamsa wouldn't hear of it. Then Bar Kamsa said, "You know, I won't only pay my fee, I will pay for all of your expenses. Please, don't embarrass me in front of all of these people." But Kamsa wouldn't hear of it, and he demanded that Bar Kamsa leaves the hall immediately. Bar Kamsa left. and ran into the hands of the Roman. to give them the city of Jerusalem, to hand them their success of the siege, an important information that led to the fall of Jerusalem. But the biggest lesson here is not only Kamsa's behavior as the host, but also the response of the sages who sat there for that dinner, watched the incident take place in front of them, and did nothing. It reminds us that at the very foundation of national catastrophes lies our very own individual social responsibility. May we all remember and carry that responsibility in our hearts and on our minds next time we have an interesting political chat with a friend. Thank you all for watching, and to all, stay safe, stay healthy and happy. I'd like to thank our director, Sloan Copeland, JBS's managing director, Dara Golob, our technical manager, Michael Paley, transmission manager, John McDevitt, and to our producer of In the News, Carol Lilienthal. For JBS, I'm Shahar Azani. Until next time, Shalom, Lehitraot, and Gmar Chatima Tova. See you all soon.